Hi, welcome back to the channel. Michelle, and today I'm going to be sharing some mistakes I've made on my homeschool journey. So if you're new here, I have a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. We are currently in our 3rd year of homeschooling, and I have definitely made some mistakes along the way, and I think it's important to share those mistakes because nobody does this perfectly. There's no perfect homeschooler. There's no perfect style. There's nothing perfect about homeschooling, but I think that's often portrayed on social media. So I want to talk about some of the mistakes I've made that can either be beneficial to you or maybe you've made these mistakes too. So the first mistake I've made in my homeschooling journey is I very early on in my homeschooling, so probably the first year, I disregarded a lot of public school curriculum, and I think that was a mistake. I thought because I was leaving the public school system, my oldest was in public school K through 2nd grade, that's not what I wanted. But in fact, I have found a lot of really quality public school curriculums or curriculums written to the public school setting that I've incorporated in my homeschooling. So for example, one of the big ones I use is Core Knowledge. Core Knowledge is available free online. It is definitely written for a public school setting, so a classroom setting. But I have found it to be really informational. It really focuses on contextual knowledge. It's written by people who know what they're talking about. It follows things like, for example, science follows next generation science standards. So it does have those benchmarks within the curriculum, which I think are really important. I am a person that really cares about who wrote the curriculum. I have a whole video about that. I'll link it up above for you about what I look for when I choose a curriculum. But for example, the Harcourt books, I think those have been really helpful. We use those for art. Again, those are written for a public school curriculum. We used it for art the last 2 years. And I think people are trying to, again, get away from that public school setting. So that includes dismissing any public school curriculum or anything that would be written or used in a public school setting. I think you're really missing out because there are some really good resources out there that you're dismissing right away just because it's public school. I don't think you need to go the complete opposite of public school. I know a lot of people do that when they come into the homeschooling journey. They don't want anything public school. They don't want it to look like public school. They don't want to use curriculum for public school. Public school necessarily isn't the problem. And I think they do have some really great curriculum options out there, and they're usually a lot cheaper than most of the other homeschooling curriculum you're going to find. So that was something I made a mistake in. I wish I would have kind of let that bias go quicker and realized that there are some great resources. Number 2 is I let social media influence my homeschooling. I talk about this in various videos I have, but I was someone who was definitely influenced by what I was seeing online. And some of that is because I didn't know any homeschoolers. I didn't come from a homeschooling environment. Homeschooling is not very popular in the area I live in. So I was really brand new to this, and social media was a way of getting information about that. But I didn't really account for people aren't really themselves or aren't portraying exactly who they are on social media. I think homeschooling gets this pretty picture view or glimpse into it, and it always looks beautiful, and the kids are always happy, and the moms are always doing everything right, and that's just not what homeschooling was. But I did very early on let those videos put out their influence, the decisions I was making in my homeschool. And I think there are some drawbacks to that. I think a lot of content creators are putting out their things just as an ad. I feel like so much of YouTube has become just ads and people selling things, and I let that influence me. I thought, this best new curriculum would work for me, and that happened, for example, for The Good and Beautiful. Back when I started homeschooling, that was so popular and everybody loved it and everybody raved about it on YouTube. So I tried using it, and it didn't. It fell flat with my family. I have an entire video about why The Good and Beautiful didn't work for us 3 years ago. I'll link that up above for you to watch. But I continued to buy it because, again, I saw everyone talking about it, how great it was. I thought, is it something I'm doing wrong? What is not working here? And it really came down to it just wasn't a quality curriculum for my family's needs. And it's funny now that I see videos about people talking about that, about how The Good and Beautiful isn't so great now. And it wasn't that great 3 years ago, but you're seeing more of that now. But before, again, it was trendy and everybody was using it and it was pretty. So I really had to step away from that. And that's something I'm still mindful to this day, is when I watch curriculum videos or I watch people talking about things, I'm mindful of the influence it's having on me. And, if I'm feeling like I am missing out because I don't have that, or it's not pretty enough or my kids aren't enjoying it enough. I'm mindful of those feelings that those videos are making, and it's completely fine to take a break from watching YouTube or even unsubscribe from people when they're really not making you feel great about yourselves or your homeschool, or just because you don't have necessarily the resources another homeschooler has. It's okay not to watch those channels and step away. So I was definitely allowed myself to be overly influenced in the beginning of my homeschool journey, and that's one of the reasons I really don't do any type of affiliate links or sponsorships on this channel, because I know what it's like to be on the other end of that and be really influenced about what you're going to buy, and especially when you have limited resources like I do. When you spend your money on things, it has to count for what it is. I want those decisions to come from me and my research, not necessarily other people's opinions or how they run their homeschool. So number 3, very early on, I was definitely, again, coming from that public school mindset, because I was public school my entire life. The idea that, you gotta prove what you learn. So we had a lot of paper that, I would have my kids write down what they learned, or a lot of worksheets. And my kids do enjoy worksheets and workbooks and things like that, but I always felt the need that we had to show proof of what we were doing. So instead of verbally going over the questions, I would have them make sure they write their answers. And this is mainly based on my older one. I don't think my 6, who was 3 at the time we started homeschooling, was ready to, write out information. And that being said, I do have, I've gotten a lot better with that. I've let go of the paper or the need to, show their work with things. But I do think it is an important skill for a child to be able to take the information or their thoughts and be able to write it down on paper and show how they know or how they understand something. That is a skill that is important. Does it have to be with every single assignment? No. And that's something I've learned. So I do keep portfolios for my kids. I'll link that up above if you want to see what I keep. But I do keep selective works, or when we're doing a language arts assignment that has a writing component, I will make sure I have them fill one of those out and have it as a record of what they can do, and that they can practice that skill of getting what's in their head down on paper, or being able to take something they read and apply it to whatever question might be. I do think that's important, so I do have them occasionally do that in their assignments, but I'm definitely a lot more chill about it, and I'm more focused on the discussion now and whether or not they understand the concept, whether more than can they regurgitate the information to me. So the next one is number 4. One thing I definitely made a mistake early on is not learning about the values or what a company or a curriculum stands for. And again, this was me being influenced, so I already talked about that one. Not really looking into who was writing the curriculum, what their credentials are. Do they know what they're talking about? I think it's very popular in the homeschooling community to get a lot of unit studies, but people don't necessarily know a lot about what they're writing about. So I think accredited resources are really important, and really knowing where your information is coming from. If there's a bias attached to that information, I think is really important to know about. And really coming from the point is, early on I tried a lot of Christian-based curriculum, because I am a Christian if you're new here, specifically ELCA Lutheran. But a lot of the mainstream Christian curriculum I don't agree with. And if you go into these companies' about me pages and you learn about them, I didn't align with a lot of what they believed. And it's not just scriptural, doctrinal, differences. It's basic things like, I'm a strong supporter of the LGBTQ plus community. And that is blanket statement, not in most Christian curriculums. It's the fact they're mostly anti. And if you look into a lot of these company values, there's a lot of discrimination within them, and that's not what I stand for as a person, let alone a homeschooler. So I really do think it's important to know about the curriculums you're using, where they're coming from, the biases and the resources they're used to getting their information, also the perspectives that these companies are representing. I think that's really important as an educator, because you are the first filter of information coming to your children. And I want my children to have multiple perspectives and really academically sound information I'm giving them. So, and number 5, not using audiobooks sooner. I don't know why I didn't do this, especially since I'm not one of those that really enjoys reading aloud a lot to my kids, and we do a lot of literature-based things, so we have a lot of reading to do. So I wish I would have used audiobooks and utilized that earlier, because I frankly enjoy them a lot more when I can listen to them. I'm not one of those animated people that really gets into the books, and I find it kind of tiresome to read that much. So I think both I and my kids get more out of it when I use audiobooks and being more aware of the resources the library has, like Hoopla and Libby. So that is also helpful too. Number 6, relates right to that, is I bought way too many books when I started homeschooling. And I didn't need to. The library system, I mean, it's good. They have interlibrary loan. I've used that multiple times, and that's been really good. But using things like audiobooks, which you get through your library, so Libby and Hoopla. So I've saved a lot of money just by going down that route of not buying the books, but using the resources that the library has, or the audio resources, or even someone gave me this advice a while ago, the Mama Librarian, love her channel. She said she uses that to preview, she uses her library system to preview which books she decides to purchase. And that is a great tip, because I do that during the summer. I will request, and sometimes if my library systems don't have them, because most libraries are connected to other libraries, if I enter library loan, I can look physically at the book and get an idea. Another resource is a lot of read alouds will be on YouTube. You can watch YouTube videos of it. So for like kids books or picture books, that's an option too. So I didn't need to buy all the books. I didn't have to have every single book for their curriculum. Borrowing it for the library or a digital copy was much more sufficient and really saved my budget. Number 7, a mistake I made was not having a dedicated time to plan and prep for school. This was essential. So I think in order for things to run smoothly and to have a nice rhythm, but also to make sure you're being accountable to the things you are responsible for as the educator, so being prepared. So what are you teaching? Do you understand what you're teaching? Having the supplies on hand, that's really hard to do if you don't have a scheduled time to prep and plan for your homeschool. So we do a Sabbath schedule, so we do 6 weeks on, 1 week off. It's not always 6 weeks, sometimes it's 7 or 8 weeks on and then 1 week off, depending on how, vacations and things land. But I always take that week off, and I'll link up above the last time I made a video on how I spend that Sabbath week off. But I take that week off and I plan for the following 6 weeks. I don't do yearly planning. I do have a general idea of what I'm going to do, but I do 6 weeks. So I print all the things I need to print. I copy anything that needs to be copied. I make sure I have the books I need from the library. So I'm really setting myself up for success. So when it comes time to do that, I just have to open the things we do. And I'll link up above the weekly plan with me that I do every Sunday. And if you watch that, you see that most of my things are ready to go and it's open and go because I've taken that specific time to plan and prep. And it's usually that week off, I'll take 1 or 2 days where I prep the things for the next 6 weeks. And then every Saturday, I'll take 25, 30 minutes, make sure I'm good to go. And that's it. And that's my scheduled plan and prep time. But that has made such a difference in the anxiety and the smoothness of our days running. I'm making sure I'm not missing lessons or skipping things because, there are days when you're tired and you don't want to look for wherever that said science experiment item is. So knowing where things are and having everything organized beforehand is really helpful. And the last one is a mistake I made is I didn't plan time for myself. So when you take on homeschooling, that is taking on a personal sacrifice on yourself. And I know some people see this differently, and that's completely fine. But you are sacrificing a big chunk of your time. When my oldest was in public school, I had a solid amount of time that I could focus some of that on myself. But when I have all 3 kids at home with me all the time, it is really hard to get time for myself. And I am a person that needs time to be by myself, not be talked to, not be asked questions, quiet alone time to recharge, as that's just the type of person I am. So making sure I have time for myself, that I'm pursuing my own interests, because guess what? I'm not just mom, not just a homeschooler, not just a wife. I'm all these things, but I'm also me, and me counts too. So making sure you have time for yourself is essential. And personally, I have a lot of roles I juggle and responsibilities I handle. So unless I actually schedule it and plan it, I'm not going to find time for myself, because I think as parents, we often put ourselves on the back burners, and that's not fair. So we need to prioritize our time. And how I do that is I make sure I schedule time for myself and different activities that are enriching to me outside of all those other responsibilities. So I thought I would end the video by sharing what my daughter thinks the biggest mistake we've made so far is. So I did. I was making this list on a notebook paper, and I asked my daughter, who was 10, she was working on a paper that she was writing for fun. I asked her, what mistakes have we made over the last 3 years? What have I done that you thought I could have done better? And of course, she was nice. She's like, oh, you're doing great, Mom. And I'm like, no, I want some critique. I want some feedback, because that's something I really facilitate in my homeschool, is a lot of open discussion. It's not hurt feelings. I want her to be honest with me if she thinks, or any of my kids think, we could change something or something's not working. Open communication is very important. So I'm like, give me some critique, really. And she's like, okay, the only thing I can think of is you talk too much, which I think she has a point. I think in trying to convey a point, I try to come from multiple angles and different views and really make sure they understand it fully. And I do get carried away sometimes because I'm really passionate about the things I talk about. So for example, in the subjects we talk about, social justice, I get really passionate about that. Same with history and the difficulty of teaching history and real history and truthful history. I really do get into that, and that's part of the great thing about this journey, is that we're learning together. But she says I do have a tendency to talk a little too much. But besides that, the only other thing she says that she thought we didn't do is she wishes we would have tried homeschooling earlier. And I said, oh, I found that interesting, because again, she had some ups and downs in public school, but nothing that was like, oh my God, no, we have to pull her, nothing like that. And she enjoyed, her teachers and her friendships and things like that. So I was like, so what was hard about public school? Was it the material? And she's like, no, that was easy. But she said that sometimes it was just, it causes her anxiety. I believe she puts it, it made her nervous a lot. So she has a lot of anxiety when it comes to like test taking. And there's definitely, in the school she went to, a very reward-based system. So if you got something right, you got rewards. And she was always so anxious about getting something wrong that she would often come home, and I could see kind of just the relief come off her face, because she didn't necessarily feel like it was an environment she could be herself, that if she didn't get the answers right, her teachers would not like her and things like that. So just kind of, she wasn't in an environment where she felt like she was being herself. So she spent most of her day masking and being this person that everybody wanted her to be, opposed to the person she was meant to be. So anxiety, that is something that she dealt with. And I wasn't really acutely aware of it as much until we started homeschooling, that is something she was dealing with, and that she wishes we had tried this journey earlier. So those are the mistakes I've made so far. If you'd like to share any mistakes you've made so far in your homeschooling journey, I'd love to hear them. If you have any specific questions about anything I talked about, leave them in the comments below. If not, thank you for watching.